name is Willie Minix. I am the lead singer and guitar player for the band The Fantastic Flying Frogs, and we're a surf rock band. You can check out our stuff, but today we're going to be talking about how to play surf guitar, and I have chosen this guitar that I just finished building this week, which I haven't named yet. If you have a good name, put it down in the comments below. This guitar is a guitar that's pretty much a surf machine. Why is it a 6-string and a 12? You may ask, because Carl Wilson played 6 strings and 12 strings in a lot of Beach Boy songs, and he's kind of my surf hero. So we're going to we're probably going to talk about techniques that are used in both instruments. So I just chose this so I don't have to switch. The bottom part of this guitar is a 6-string, and the top part is the 12-string. The 12-string, I tried to design it and set it up so it sounds kind of like a Rickenbacker. People get on my case for saying Bacher. A Rickenbacker guitar, whereas the bottom is more like a Fender Stratocaster. Alright, so now we're going to talk about gear. I guess we'll talk first about guitars. In the early days of surf music, Strats were really popular, and so were Jaguars. They were both made by Fender. Strats had a 25.5 scale length, whereas Jaguars have a 24-inch scale length, thus making the strings a little bit more floppier. And when you're playing with a pick, you can get some really floppy, nice tremolo picking that way. But by no means are those the only kind of guitars that you can use to play surf. Gretsch is also an incredibly popular guitar that surf guys like to use, and Carl Wilson used an ES335 a lot of times when playing surf stuff. And what blows me away about Carl too is I was watching a Beach Boy concert from the 80s, and they started up Fun, and Carl ended the last song, I forget what it was, it might have been Sloop John B., playing a 12-string, and he just steps right up, hits the reverb pedal on his board, and starts playing the lead opening to Fun on the 12-string. And it was amazing. I was like, gosh, the guy's fingers must have been incredibly strong to be able to play lead on his 12-string. But so 12 strings are also a very popular guitar in some surf music, especially if you're playing Beach Boy style stuff, because they use that to thicken up their sound. As far as reverb goes, reverb is the most important thing that you need when you're playing surf music. And you can get it in a wide variety of ways. The way I'm getting my reverb right now is I'm running it through, I'm not even using an amp. A lot of times if you have a good amp, you can, like a Fender Twin, you can have reverb and sometimes a tremolo channel right there, and it'll give it to you. What I'm using today is I have 3 pedals, well actually I have 4 pedals that I'm using. I have an MS50G by Zoom that I'm using what's called a Spring 63 setting on it. I don't know if that's an original setting to the pedal or if that's one that you add when you update it. But anyway, I've got the Spring 63 that I'm using for my reverb sound. For my amp sound, I'm using a Joyo American pedal, which is supposed to kind of emulate the Fender Twin or the Fender Champ or that whole Fender line of amps from way back in the day. I also have 2 other pedals that I'm using periodically. I have a Moon, a really cheap little reverb pedal to add just a tiny little bit more reverb. And it's on right now. And I also have a tremolo called a Trelicopter. I'm not sure who makes it. I can't really see because there's no light under my desk. But I do remember it's called the Trelicopter. And if I can find it, I'll put it up here so you can see it. But I use that for my tremolo sometimes. So on the old amps, tremolo and reverb sometimes came and they would have a pedal and you could switch the tremolo or the reverb on using the little pedal extension, and that's all they had back in the day when they were playing surf music. So sometimes you can use a little bit of distortion, and a lot of modern surf bands will do that. Maybe they'll have chorus or something else, but I'm kind of old school and I tend to do all my recordings with just reverb. maybe a little bit of tremolo, and that's pretty much it. As far as any other gear that you might want to use, you know, you don't need a lot to get a surf sound, but sometimes it's nice to have a guitar that has a tremolo unit, which some people call this the whammy bar. Ryan over at 60 Cycle Hum cracks me up because he calls it the wiggle stick. So if you got a wiggle stick added onto your guitar, then you're definitely good to go. And it could be a Bigsby, it could be a Fender Strat style, or it could be the Jaguar style. It really doesn't matter. Offset, I personally have decided I pretty much hate offset tremolos because I haven't ever played one that I liked. Someday maybe I'll change my mind on that if somebody shows me something better. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, when you're using your tremolo, some people like to have it to where their tremolo arm can swing free. That's kind of how I prefer it. Some people like to have it sort of locked in one position where they play. It kind of aggravates me when I have it like that. So I like to just keep it down there, and then I can flip it around when I need it, or I can bring it up when I need it and then just let it drop. That's up to you how you want to do it for yourself. But sometimes when you have a tremolo unit on your guitar, it's a little stiff. And this guitar I just built, and I put a bunch of springs on the back because I like tuning stability. When you have a tremolo stick, a lot of times you can kind of hear that maybe it just knocked it slightly out of tune. The tremolo unit sometimes can do that. So you might want to adjust how many springs you have on the back, and you basically just take this plate off the back of a Strat, and then you get access to the springs there. I have 3 springs on this one, and they're brand new, really stiff springs. I may either change them out for older springs from another guitar that I've worked on, or I might just take one spring out so that because it's just a little bit too hard to use this right now. It's a little too stiff to get a really good wobble going. But that's really all you need for the gear for playing surf music. Hey, we're going to talk about reverb. We already talked about reverb. We're going to talk about rhythm techniques for a minute. Reverb, rhythm. I can see how my brain kind of confused those words a little bit. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about this thing right here. You may have heard this. That's a technique used in surf music called tick-tock. And in order to do it, you need to learn something else called palm muting. Palm muting is when you take the fat, fleshy part of your hand and you lay it across the saddles of your guitar. Now, this whole thing is called the tremolo block, and this part of it, the top part, is called the bridge, and these individual parts where the strings cross over are called the saddles, okay? You want to lay your hand right on the saddles and possibly a little bit in front of it, and that's what's going to help you get that muted sound. And when you get that muted sound, you can hear the drip of the reverb, that sound that you can laugh at me, it's okay, my wife does all the time. You can get that sound that's imitating on mine, or it actually is doing it on a reverb tank. You're getting that spring wobble is what's happening, and that's what makes that sound. One pedal that I forgot to mention earlier in the video is the Surfy Bear. Surfy Bear makes an actual spring reverb tank that you can plug in, and you can run it through your regular pedal setup, and it will give you that spring reverb sound that you know so well and love. Anyway, let's talk back about palm muting. On the early Jaguars, they actually had a thing that you could push down and it would pop up a felt piece or a foam piece that would go under the strings, and that way you could use regular picking techniques without having to palm mute, and it was something that some of the early players used. I don't think it ever caught on and became very popular because you don't see it much on the Jaguar lines when they come out with them these days. And the other thing about it is, a lot of times I like to palm mute and use sustaining notes. So I might move my hand to where the palm back part is touching the strings, but the front part is off of the string. So you get something like this. And you can kind of go back and forth between a strum and a palm mute. And if you have that block with the foam piece, it defeats that purpose and you can't do any of that. They don't make those foam mutes for guitar, for Strats. However, there is a solution. And Carol Kay, who played on Pet Sounds and a lot of the Beach Boys stuff, used this on her bass. She actually shoved a piece of felt right there and taped it across the string. So if you're playing a song, like if you're recording and you want a perfect palm muted sound to where you're not going to mess up, that might be a little sneaky trick that you can use to kind of get that sound without having to play 3.5-4 minutes of a song totally palm muted. Now, palm muting leads into the tick-tock. So the tick-tock is this rhythmic thing that the rhythm player often did that would keep in time with the drums, and it kind of went under what the other guitar players were doing. Oftentimes in certain songs you'll hear like 3 guitars happening at once where you've got somebody tick-tocking, and you can tick-tock on any chord. Then you'll have a rhythm guitar doing something rhythmic over top of that, and then you'll have your lead guitar over top of that kind of doing what it does. And so the tick-tock became really, really popular, and if you throw that into a song, it instantly is going to start sounding a little bit more surf-like. Something we want to talk about now is using your tremolo bar or your wiggle stick to use to accentuate the chords that you play. So you may strum a chord, and instead of like normally in a song, if I was asked to play, like, say at church or something, and I was asked to play an A minor, I might play it like this. And just sort of arpeggiate it and pick, you know, back and forth a little bit. But in surf music, it was more common to strum it and use the wiggle stick to kind of get you some of that, what they call wobble. And the wobble is pretty much you're adding your tremolo using the stick, and you can control how much tremolo by how much stick you use. If you want to, you can also use a tremolo pedal. In conjunction with your wiggle stick. You'll hear that a lot in some of the spaghetti western type guitar music that you would hear in like a Sergio Leone movie. I want to talk about finger picking. I like to use a lot of finger picking in the surf songs that I record. And especially on bridges. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll record a 12-string part, which I got this from, the best example is the Beach Boys version of California Dreamin', where it has some of the mamas and the papas singing harmonies with the Beach Boys, and it has Roger McGuinn from the Byrds playing the 12-string with Carl, and they do, like, at the end of the song, there's sort of a 12-string duet going on, and it sounds really, really cool. But this technique, it kind of evolved. I found out that a lot of people, when they don't have a 12-string guitar, will do what they call Nashville string or Nashville tune a guitar, which means that you buy a pack of 12 strings, you take all the high strings and put them on a 6-string guitar, you record it and pan it to one side, then you play the exact same pattern or the exact same part on a normal guitar and you pan it to the left side, and so between the two you get this interesting 12-string effect. You could add a little bit of chorus to it, and then it just really starts to make it sound like a 12-string. What I like to do is I want a huge sound. So what I'll do is I'll record a rhythm passage using the 12-string, then I'll record it again using a 6-string, and then I'll record it again with the Nashville strung guitar, and then I'll put the 12-string in the middle, pan the other two as far to the right and left as I can, and it makes a massive sound. And it really kind of gets into that Roger McGuinn territory that way, and then you can EQ it however you want to. When you're using a 12-string in surf, you don't have to go for that whole Roger McGuinn tone, though, because Carl Wilson, he didn't always have that tone when he played, and a lot of times his 12-string had more of a little bit more medium range than Roger McGuinn's did. And I think the reason for that is Carl didn't play the 12-string on like a lot of the Pet Sounds songs. It was actually one of the guys from the Wrecking Crew that played the 12-string, and he was using a Fender, not a Rickenbacker. So you end up with a little bit different sound that way. So that's where I say 12-string can come in and marry right into the rhythmic techniques of surf playing. Next up, we're going to talk about some popular progressions in surf playing. So now we're going to talk about some rhythmic chord progressions that you might encounter in surf music. Now, here is something that's kind of interesting about Southern California. It used to be part of Mexico, which in turn used to be part of Spain. So there's a whole lot of Spanish influence on surf music, and thus there's also a big Arabic influence because Spanish music was influenced by Arabic music. Which is what Dick Dale discovered when he first started playing surf, is that being of Lebanese descent, he could hear some of the Spanish-influenced music of the area kind of reminded him of some of the Lebanese music that he grew up hearing, and so it was really natural for him to kind of marry the two, and that became, like, Dick Dale sort of, I mean, we could pretty much say he started the surf genre, and that was pretty much what happened and it became such a connected feature that you hear it all the time. And then when they started making cowboy movies and they started incorporating that surf sound, it just sort of fit right in, because here you've got that surf influence by the Spanish music going right on into the cowboy western, which is very Spanish influenced too. So in order to play a very popular Spanish chord progression, I want to teach you a chord progression called the Andalusian cadence. Now, there are several variants on the Andalusian cadence. I'm going to start by teaching you the most popular, and there are so many songs that follow this in surf music and not in surf music. So you might hear songs by, like, I'll give you an example, China Girl by David Bowie follows this, but so does Runaway by Del Shannon, and then the Ventures did their surf version of Runaway, and then a lot of people started using this cadence as part or sometimes the entirety of their song, and even the Beach Boys latched onto it and used the Andalusian cadence in Good Vibrations. So the way the Andalusian cadence goes, I'm going to teach it to you in a simple method. I'm assuming that you're new, starting out with the guitar. So technically we're in the minor key, but I'm going to refer to this as though we're in the major. A minor is the 6th chord in C major. And we're not going to play a C chord at all using this Andalusian cadence, but we're going to start on the minor 6. Then we're going to go down to the G. Then we're going to go to the F. And then we're going to go to the E major. And a lot of times you'll hear this rhythm. So you kind of get that cool little Spanishy Mexican sort of salsa. It's not salsa. What would it be? Flamenco. It'd be a flamenco kind of rhythm that goes with that cadence. Now, other variants on this is you can kind of go in the opposite direction. You could go A minor, E, F, G, and then land on the A minor. And that's something some people do also. Or you gotta rework it. How about A minor, F, G, E, A minor. Any of those variants will kind of set you up for different parts of a song that uses that progression, and all of a sudden now you're getting into a really surfy kind of territory when you start to use that. Another progression is when it's sort of related, it's part of the Andalusian cadence, but you're not actually using the whole Andalusian cadence. You're just using the major 3 and the major 4. So you can do it by sliding up to from an E to sort of an F. You're not playing all of your strings this way. It's sort of a rhythmic thing that you're doing just behind what the lead player's doing. That's a very Spanish sort of a thing that you get in a lot of flamenco music, but Dick Dale uses it in Miserlou also. Another thing that's sort of related to the Andalusian cadence is instead of going from like the E to the F, sometimes it just goes back and forth between the minor 6 and the major 3, minor 6 to the E. That's one thing that you can do when you're playing in the Andalusian cadence that sort of is a really fun little change from the whole progression you're still playing. What I'm playing there is sort of a 12-bar blues. 12-bar blues is a really, really popular thing that is used in surf music. You'll hear it in a lot of the early Beach Boys stuff. You'll hear it in the Surfaris. You'll hear it in Venture's songs. It's just a lot of surf music is closely related to blues music. And but sometimes it would get changed up a little bit. So some songs like Surfin' by the Beach Boys is technically a 12-bar blues, but they add a couple little segments and they expand it out, and so it ends up becoming kind of a, I think in one part it's a 15-bar blues, and then in another part it's like a 16-bar blues. Sometimes songs will truncate it and it'll be like an 8-bar blues, which an example of that just popped into my head is not a surf song, but Great Balls of Fire by Jerry Lee Lewis is an example of an 8-bar blues. And I'm pretty sure it's Surfer Girl might be an 8-bar blues also. I have to, or it's that form. So like a lot of times you'll hear those variants on a 12-bar blues, and that becomes a groundwork for you to play rhythm for behind somebody playing a lot of surfy kind of lead. But that also brings up this thing that I like to call an E vamp. The E vamp is used in songs like Fun 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 and other blues-derived songs where you're basically playing a figure where you're going from the second fret and you're playing it at the second string on the A string along with an open E, and then you're playing back and forth between 4 and 5 with your pinky. Then you move the whole thing thing up a string, then back. Then a lot of times you'll play a B chord. I like, when I'm playing rhythm, I like to play my B chord with one finger right here, so that way I can throw in some licks that are part of the pentatonic box there, slide down to the A, and you can do the same thing, and then you're back to... So that's what I call the E vamp. One of the last things I want to talk about in the rhythm section is this little thing that I like to call this the Carl Wilson, Al Jardine, Beach Boy kind of rhythmic thing. Let me show you how I first learned this. I learned it as a Jimi Hendrix thing, where you go... And Hendrix would often start up here on the E string and play that F shape as a G chord. But I noticed that when you're watching Carl or Al play, and a good example of this is if you can find the full version of back in the 80s, the Beach Boys had a TV show called Endless Summer, and there's a scene where they're all sitting around a campfire. Somebody edited those scenes together into the full campfire concert, basically, that they did. And you can literally see Al and Carl playing what I'm getting ready to show you, while the other two guys are playing just regular chords down here. And they do this, I heard that this was first kind of used by the Beach Boys on the Sloop John B recording, and instead of coming from this side, they always would come... from the other direction in sort of a suspended fourth sounding, or maybe suspended two. I'm not exactly sure what that is. I guess it's a suspended four. But that's a really cool little rhythmic thing that you can throw in if you want to get sort of that Beach Boy sound. Try using that, and that'll get you there rhythmically. So now we're done talking about rhythm, and next chapter we're going to move on to lead. So now we're talking about lead. One of the things that you might want to do, which is a really, really popular thing in surf music, is flip your guitar down to the back pickup. Now, I don't like the back pickup sometimes because it sounds a little too brittle and thin to me, so I have a Gilmour switch, not named after a surfer, but named after Gilmour from the band Pink Floyd, David Gilmour. He has a switch that activates the neck pickup and turns it on with the bridge. That's what this would sound like. I have another switch that flips the phase, so I can knock those into a different phase, and so I like that sound for my lead stuff for surf. And all my Strat style guitars have those switches on it because I couldn't live without it. And pretty much every guitar I build, I automatically throw those in because they're just so versatile and useful for switching. But now when we're talking about lead, what we're talking about most of the time is playing in the second position of the pentatonic box, okay? So this is the minor form, the E minor pentatonic box, and this is the G major pentatonic box. I like to call this position box, I like to call this shape box 1 when I'm teaching my students, because it's the primary box that everybody should learn. Other systems might call it something else. Cage calls it the G-shaped box, etc. I just simplify it, call it box 1, position 1. And from my experience, the Grateful Dead, I believe, Jerry Garcia liked to play in position 1 a lot. Carl Wilson often would play it the way Chuck Berry would in position 2, because this is more of your bluesy sounding. If you're in the key of E. Now, why is it bluesy sounding? Well, I got to give you a little theory lesson. What makes blues sound like blues is not a magical blues box that some people use. What makes blues sound like blues is a scale called the Mixolydian plus scale. So you're basically taking a Mixolydian scale, which if it's in the key of C, you're only lowering the B down to a B flat. So here are your notes: C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat, and C. That's where you get your Mixolydian scale. It's a mode, okay? Modes are when you take your note and you just shift it. Okay, there's whole videos on modes. Now, to make it a plus scale, what you're doing is you're adding 2 notes to that scale. You're adding an E flat, so a flat third, and you're adding a flat 5. And when you have the first position of the pentatonic box and the second position, you basically have 10 notes. This is 5 notes, this is 5 notes. When you cram them together, you have all 10 notes of the Mixolydian plus scale, and that's what gives you that blues sound, okay? And so when you're playing surf rock, Chuck Berry licks are really, really important. And so Chuck Berry used a lot of double stops in that position. So you might go. And Chuck Berry a lot of times would bend double stops like that, which you've got to work up your hand strength to be able to do that, but that's something really, really important. Now, the other thing that when you're doing a Chuck Berry lick, I want to throw this in before I move on to other famous guitar players and their surf music, is Chuck Berry, and you'll see this in Sweet Little 16, you'll see it in the beginning of Fun, Fun, Fun. He would do this really cool technique where he would hold one string down. So right now I'm holding the B string on the 12th fret, the G string at the 14th fret, and what I'm doing is I'm going to push up. I'm playing both strings, but I'm pushing up the G string till it matches pitch with the B string. He also does that in Johnny Be Good. And then he might drop into that rhythm that I showed you earlier. So that's some Chuck Berry stuff that found its way into surf music. I want to talk about another guitar player that was really, really influential on Carl Wilson in particular, and thus in surf music, is Duane Eddy. And Duane Eddy was a rockabilly player, and he used to do this really cool thing where he would slide into his chords. So he might go. And that little rockabilly thing, you can do that, you know, on an A chord. really cool, like, rockabilly sound. So Chuck Berry kind of made the double stops really, really popular. We could technically call this a triple stop, even though you're playing a chord, but you're sliding that triple stop into a new chord. So you start on the whatever would be the chord below, and you slide it in place. I think an example of this is a Summertime Blues. Eddy Cochran was another one that was a rockabilly player that used this technique a lot too. And both of those guys had a big influence on Carl Wilson. So check out some of their music, listen to it, and see what you think about it. A person that uses a lot of these techniques, and he's kind of the master of combining them all fluidly, is Brian Setzer. If you just put any Brian Setzer album on and just listen to what he's doing, he takes every single technique I'm covering in this video and he throws it in there, and it just is. He's just amazing. If I could just be an eighth of the guitar player that Brian Setzer is, I would die a happy man. Playing surf guitar, for me, coming from an Eric Clapton background, I naturally want to play my vibrato with my fingers, either B.B. King style with butterfly vibrato, or that Eric Clapton style where he just moves it back and forth real fast. But in surf music, a lot of times you'll play some lead and your whammy bar is what gives you the vibrato. And on certain songs that have sort of a jazzy flavor, they're going to use that major 7th chord as a triple stop, where you're playing these 3 notes together, or possibly 4 notes, but you're combining it with your stick, and that's what gives it that flavor. I've got a song called Just a Dream, the Fantastic Flying Frog song, that goes. That's how I got that sound for it. So that's what I like to call using the vibrato when you're playing lead, and that's something that you really need to kind of master if you're going to get good at playing surf sound and make it really sound like surf solos. Right now I'm going to talk about 2 things that will really kick you up to that Dick Dale level, and this is tremolo picking and tremolo sliding. Let's start with tremolo sliding. Basically, a good practice is I don't play with a pick. You probably noticed I play with my fingers, and I also play mandolin, and I play a lot of my tremolo picking with my fingers on a mandolin, and so I've gotten really good at doing it that way, and it took a minute to get used to it on the guitar. But what I found is I can mute strings that I don't want to use with my other fingers, and then I can just tremolo pick and slide down the neck. A good exercise: start at the 12th, get the rhythm going, and then just drag your finger down the neck of the guitar, and you'll have the tremolo picking. You can also go the other direction. So that's one part of the tremolo picking thing. The tremolo slide is, Dick Dale used it all the time. The other thing Dick Dale did is he used a lot of tremolo picking for his lead solos. So he might be like, he would play out leads just on one string while he was tremolo picking that string, and that kind of is the same technique that you see on oud playing. When you're playing an oud, you get tremolo picking on one of the sets of strings. They come in two sets on an oud generally, where there's like 10 strings. I think I've got an oud right off camera. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. I've got 11 on my oud. So there's usually 5 sets of 2 and then an extra string in the bass. And growing up in a Lebanese family, he obviously saw people playing that way, and an oud has no frets. So to get the cool sound, you slide along to the different places that you play, and that's what gives you that neat sound that Arabic music has. So he incorporated that into the guitar, and that's why you play a lot of the Dick Dale licks up the neck and down the neck rather than in a box, you know. That's tremolo picking and tremolo slide. But it leads us into our next topic, which will be the last topic that we're going to cover in this video, and it's the different scales that you use in playing surf music. What you just heard is the Phrygian dominant scale. Also, it could be the harmonic minor. Basically, the harmonic minor is the root position of the Phrygian, what becomes the Phrygian dominant mode. A mode is, like I said, it's the same notes, it's just in a different order. The Phrygian dominant, the way I like to play it, is I like to find whatever key I'm in. So let's say I'm in the key of C. Actually, before I horrify you anymore, I'm going to tune up again. I wiggle sticked a little too much. Let's say I'm playing in an A minor, which is technically the same notes as the key of C. So my A minor pentatonic box is right here at the 5th fret. Here. That's where all my goodness lies, right? Well, if I go to the fret behind and I play the notes I get that Phrygian dominant scale kind of thrown in there. Also, you may have heard of the Hijaz Maqam, or the Maqam Hijaz. It's also called the Egyptian or sometimes the Arabic scale, the Hijaz Car, the Shad Araban, the Shanaz, several other different names. But basically, these are different scales in different places: Turkey, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, across the continent, the northern part of the continent of Africa. They all have different names for this scale, and they all basically come from the oud. And so what kind of happens is you end up, if you're playing the Dick Dale style, up the string, then what you get is a pattern that kind of follows, you get a pattern that follows certain notes up the neck and back down the neck, and that's what you use to kind of get those surf kind of tones and tunes that way. Here's what it would be on the E string if you were playing, like, say, Miserlou. In Miserlou is an E and an F back and forth pretty much. So I guess you could say it's kind of in the key of E. You're starting on open, and then it's 1, 4, 5, then it's 7, 8, and then here's where it gets tricky. Some people play it, if it's a Phrygian dominant, they're going to go 11, 12, but if they're playing the Hijaz Maqam, it's going to go 10, 12. So I'll play it both ways. Open, 1, 4, 5, 7, 8, 11, 12. Now if you do it the other way, you get open 1, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, 12. But most of the time, when you're wanting to get that sort of a Arabic flavor, you only need to open 1, 4, 5. That's where the Spanish flavor comes in, and then it gets kind of mixed together, and both of them become surf that way. It's a really cool thing. Or you could be like, if you're playing in E, your pentatonic box is up here at the 12th fret. And so the 11 and 12 become the box, well, I guess I call it a box, the Phrygian dominant box that you'd use to go that way. So that's how you play that cool little Arabic stuff that goes with your surf stuff. That's how you play surf guitar. That's a really long, complicated lesson, but I hope you got something out of it that'll help you play some surf music. Listen, if you like what we're doing, one of the best things you can do to support what is going on over here is go to Spotify, check out the Fantastic Flying Frogs, and put a bunch of our songs in your playlists, because that's how we kind of know that, and we can make a little bit of money that way. Or you can check out our Patreon at Minix Music, or you can just keep watching our videos, subscribe, like, share it with your friends, and hopefully you got something out of today's video that will really help you rock it to the next level and really get your surf playing jacked up a notch. Have a great day. We'll talk to you later.